We had a lot of talk about this running back class dating back years, from Bijan Robinson, Tank Bigsby, Sean Tucker, all these guys. We were ready for them to be in the NFL. Now they are officially in the NFL, so we are going to rank them. We're going to go through our top 15 running backs, tier-based rankings, how you guys should be approaching them in rookie drafts, talking about how they kind of fit into the dynasty landscape, and also where you should be picking them, and if they're good values, if they're bad values, that kind of thing. So as always, if you guys enjoy, leave a like, subscribe to the channel. If this is the first time you're checking some of our videos out, go check out the other videos we've put out the past couple of days. A ton of content coming this week and on the weekend, so definitely stay tuned for that. But before we get into it, Danny, how you doing?
Doing well, doing well. And yeah, I mean, we went through a lot of these guys in depth in our pre-draft rookie running back ranking. So today's video is going to be a little bit shorter, just kind of giving you guys an outline of our top 10, obviously discussing the landing spots, how they kind of fit schematically, and giving you a little sneak peek at what we thought about them as prospects. But if you guys want that deep dive, tail the tape videos, pre-draft rookie running back rankings, I mean, we're going to be releasing these throughout the week.
Yeah, exactly. We went in on like their strengths, weaknesses as prospects in those videos, but we are not going to do that in this video. Kind of just talk about the dynasty landscape as a whole and where you should be selecting these guys in rookie drafts, getting right down to it. So without further ado, let's hit the intro. All right, so as you guys can see, we have our top 15 running backs in tier-based format. On the side, on the left column, is just basically how they stack up amongst all dynasty running backs, including veterans. So obviously, in a tier of his own is Bijan Robinson, the RB1 in dynasty right now, the most difficult running back to trade for. If you don't think he's RB1, I challenge you to try and trade Breece Hall or Jonathan Taylor for him right now. You probably won't be able to do it. Top 10 draft capital to the Atlanta Falcons, an offense that produced 2 top 5 rushers in DVOA, even though they had a 5th-round running back and a 33-year-old converted wide receiver as their lead ball carriers. So throwing in a transcendent talent like Bijan Robinson, a zone rushing scheme, he can get a lot of receiving work working with Desmond Ridder, who's obviously going to rely on him quite a bit. Love the landing spot for Bijan Robinson. Love the draft capital. Love the projection. Going to easily be a top 3 redraft running back for me this time in the summer as well.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree here. 8th overall draft capital, like you said, lands in a fantastic spot with Arthur Smith, with that Atlanta Falcons running scheme. I mean, we prefaced this all offseason, but as much as we like Tyler Algier, like he was still a day 3 running back that rushed for over 1,000 rushing yards as a rookie in that Arthur Smith scheme. You plug in the talent, the draft capital, the team investment that Bijan Robinson will represent on this team, we could be talking about the next RB1 for the next 3+ years, given how much production you could be seeing from this guy.
Yeah, absolutely. He's definitely going to be a force for fantasy football. And if you guys have the 101 and you're a competitive team, I have the 101 in one league where I'm trying to make a competitive push this year. And it's going to be very, very fun getting those fantasy points from Bijan Robinson. So the next kind of tier down, also a great running back asset to have, is Jahmyr Gibbs, who obviously saw a bump from the NFL draft because we expected this guy to go, I don't know, mid to late first round. Maybe he falls outside of the first round early in the second round. And he actually went 12th overall to the Detroit Lions. So this is a big time boost for him because now we have a high team investment. Again, football ideologies aside, we would never take a running back 12th overall, but the Lions did it. And we're excited that they did because not only is Jahmyr Gibbs a great fit for their offense, this is the same scheme, the same coaching staff that worked with Alvin Kamara in New Orleans. They were a top 5 offense in points per game last year. And also, they ran the ball pretty much more than anybody in the red zone, which led to Jamal Williams, of course, having a monster touchdown season. And even though Jahmyr Gibbs probably won't see that kind of workload, that work will probably go to David Montgomery, who they signed in free agency. DeAndre Swift had 6 targets in 2021 per game and 5 targets per game in a pretty much lost season, injury-riddled season last year. And like I said, the Lions, good offense, run the ball in the red zone. Even if this is a 1-2 punch, David Montgomery is taking away the dirty carries, Jahmyr Gibbs getting most of the receiving work. We can still see Jahmyr Gibbs finish as an RB1 his rookie season, maybe even a top 8 running back his rookie season.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree when it comes to Jahmyr Gibbs. It's pretty simple to me. The way we've talked about DeAndre Swift the last few years, we're talking about a guy who was a round 1, round 2 type of bend pick in our redraft leagues. Well, Jahmyr Gibbs is as good of, if not a better prospect than what DeAndre Swift represented. He was drafted by this new coaching regime for the Detroit Lions. He's drafted into a much better situation. Remember, when DeAndre Swift was drafted, the Lions offense did not have the outlook that it does now. Now we have evidence that this could be a top 5 overall scoring offense, like you mentioned, in the NFL. Not to mention the big kicker is you're talking about a early to mid second round pick that was used on DeAndre Swift versus, like you said, the 12th overall pick used on Jahmyr Gibbs. The reactions in the war room, everybody was fired up to add this dynamic playmaker to their team. This is a prospect who, from a receiving standpoint, compares most favorably to Christian McCaffrey in the last few years when it comes to prospects. It is as crystal clean a situation as possible. And like we kind of mentioned, DeAndre Swift, when he's been healthy, has been a legitimate 19, 20 PPR points per game scorer. If Jahmyr Gibbs is going to set in as a rookie, get that receiving involvement, and potentially reach upwards of 10 to 12 carries per game in conjunction with 5 to 6 targets per game, we could be looking at a top 10 back as soon as year one.
Yeah, exactly. We saw Kamara do it year one on a minimal workload. We could definitely see Jahmyr Gibbs do it on a minimal workload. So I'm pretty sure everybody knows these two guys are the top running backs. We're not breaking any news here. As far as where we would take them in like rookie drafts, 101, obviously, for Bijan Robinson. He's a first-round startup pick in super flex drafts. Jahmyr Gibbs, in a rookie draft, he is our clear 105 after Bijan and the top 3 quarterbacks, Richardson, Bryce Young, and CJ Stroud. And as far as startup draft value, he's my RB4 in Dynasty. Once Bijan, Jonathan Taylor, and Breece Hall are off the board, I think you can take Jahmyr Gibbs no problem in the mid-third round type of area.
Yeah, and I think, like, again, he would be my RB4 as well. But if someone were to tell me that he was their RB2 in Dynasty, I don't think that's blasphemous. You're getting a young running back with the draft capital, with the receiving outlook. I think he has every bit the ceiling of any single player in that list.
Yeah, and maybe you wanted to take the immediate win now value of Christian McCaffrey in a startup. I wouldn't blame you. So RB5, RB6 would probably be the lowest that I would rank Jahmyr Gibbs. So let's get into the real discussion points, which is the RB2 caliber guys in Dynasty right now, which is Zach Charbonnet and Devon Achane in this third tier for us. I have Zach Charbonnet ahead, so I'll talk about him. You have Devon Achane ahead, so I'll let you talk about him. But Zach Charbonnet, for me, I'm kind of just trusting the fact that he was a top 55 pick in the NFL draft. The Seattle Seahawks seem to be committing to the run game, obviously, by drafting another running back after drafting Kenneth Walker in the top 50 last year. I think they're going to cannibalize each other, which is my worry from like a fantasy output standpoint. But from a value standpoint, I know Zach Charbonnet is a great running back. I had him very closely rated, Jahmyr Gibbs, going into the draft, and he actually has a skill set that Kenneth Walker does not, which is that he was a great receiving back in college despite his size and like physical running nature. So what I think is going to happen in this backfield is that Kenneth Walker is going to get 15 to 20 carries a game, probably no receiving work anymore. And Zach Charbonnet will probably get, 10 to 12 carries, maybe 4 or 5 targets. I don't see a reason why Zach Charbonnet can't be like a light version of what we're projecting for Jahmyr Gibbs. But the easy way to project it for Jahmyr Gibbs is that he has the body style of being that type of player. But I don't think that's out of the range of outcomes for Zach Charbonnet, because I do think he was an excellent receiving back. And we talked about that, obviously, in the pre-draft video, breaking down some of the metrics. But, I mean, you're talking about a dude that legit had a top-tier 90th percentile target share, even at 6 foot, 215 pounds.
Yeah, absolutely. Not to mention, he's also one of the toughest runners in this entire draft, arguably the toughest runner in this entire draft. So you're getting a tough running type of player with the receiving skill set to be able to contribute, aka what that translates to is the most valuable touches in fantasy on the goal line and in the receiving game. It's a very similar situation. I know people are going to watch this right now and be like, how are you going to compare this to potentially a future Hall of Fame running back and one that was an all-pro when he was at his prime? But this really reminds me of a Bud Light version of what Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt represented, because Kareem Hunt, although Nick Chubb was the better pure runner, Kareem Hunt stole some valuable goal line touches from him, stole some valuable receiving work from him, and was still a top 15 running back despite working in tandem with Nick Chubb. I can see this being the case for the Seahawks. We already know Pete Carroll, when he has the backs to be able to do so, loves to run the football, loves to play through his running backs. And now you got 2 invested top 51 overall picks in the last 2 years. Yeah, absolutely. This is going to be a lower ranked spot for Charbonnet than if he were to go to, I don't know, top of the second round, Arizona, another team that could really use a pure bell cow. But I still think the ceiling is absolutely there. The implied value, if Walker were to miss any time, that Charbonnet would be a fringe top 5 level fantasy running back. Yeah, I mean, if you can get this guy in any point of the second round of your rookie drafts, I think you're getting a guy who, at worst case scenario, if he's Kareem Hunt from last year, where he wasn't really involved, Kareem Hunt at the early portion of the season was still holding an early to mid second round type of translatable value on the open market. So worst case scenario, you're getting this high implied type of piece. Best case scenario, you're also getting that work in conjunction with Kenneth Walker.
Yeah, absolutely. And Devon Achane is the other guy that kind of fits into this tier as well. And he obviously is not the best projection for a big workload in the NFL because he's only 188 pounds. He's a smaller running back, but he has the speed and he's a perfect fit for this offense, which is why he vaults up here. You guys know I was not as high on Devon Achane. If you go back to that running back rankings video we did pre-draft, I think he's kind of a straight line speed, receiving ability kind of projection. But in this Miami Dolphins offense, that's really all he's going to need to do because, when we look at schematically what they do, Raheem Mostert ranked third in the NFL last year with 73 runs on jet motion type of plays. We know that this McDaniel 49ers type of run scheme is going to get their players space, and Devon Achane will exploit space like nobody really in this class outside of maybe Jahmyr Gibbs. And also Raheem Mostert ranked 10th in outside zones, in pitches, in stretch type of runs. Keep in mind, he only had 180 carries on the season. So from a raw output percentage standpoint, he was running those runs like 55 of his runs out of 180. So he was running that like every 3 runs. And if you give that type of workload, that type of volume, and those schematically type of runs to Devon Achane, he's going to house some of those, 4, 5, 6, 7 times a season.
Yeah, I mean, not to mention, and once we add Coach Mike McDaniel at the helm, Mike McDaniel's shown in the past that there is no size prerequisite when it comes to his running backs. Look at San Francisco, for example. Matt Breida has gotten a big workload. This is a 190-pound running back. Elijah Mitchell, 201 pounds, has gotten a big workload in times. Christian McCaffrey, who they just traded for, obviously that's the outlier of all outliers, but the point remains, they're not a old school type of system where I need my 220-pound bell cow and I'm going to play through him. No, Mike McDaniel picked this guy in the 3rd round, has a plan for how he wants to utilize him, literally on the phone call says, we're in love with your speed. We want to get you involved in this offense. And not to mention, we have the sample size from Raheem Mostert, like you mentioned last year. 183 carries. He still had the 3rd most in terms of runs in motion. He still had the 10th most in terms of outside zones and pitches, like you said. Just because you're the lead running back doesn't mean they're just going to jam you up the middle 10 times a game. No, if that's your skill set to be able to get outside, use your speed, absolutely destroy angles, Mike McDaniel will put you in that position to succeed. That's why they traded for Jeff Wilson last year, to take the dirty carries. You want your speed back to be on the edge, making a defender miss and maybe taking one to the house, which Mike McDaniel knows inherently.
Yeah, he's a new school running back. We are so obsessed with guys who get 20 carries a game and 3 or 4 targets a game. Those guys rarely exist anymore. And Devon Achane is the type of new school back that we're going to see finish, potentially as RB1s or, high-end RB2s in fantasy because, simply put, those, Najee Harris types don't really come along very often that get all the work under the sun. So these 2 guys, I have no, qualms with anybody who wants to take them late 1st round, early 2nd round. Agreed. I think that's about the range that they're going to go in most of your rookie drafts. These next group of running backs, the RB3 types, go ahead before we move on.
I'll just quickly add, so for reference in this RB2 group, so for the first 2, we both agree, Bijan, Jahmyr Gibbs. For this group, you have Charbonnet 3, Achane at 4. I have Achane at 3, Charbonnet at 4. So they're still both clearly in this tier, still both guys we clearly would want to take at the end of the 1st, early 2nd, like you said.
Yeah, so the RB3 tier here, we have Roschon Johnson, Kendre Miller, Tank Bigsby, Chase Brown, Tajay Spears. A couple of these guys got day 2 draft capital, right? We have Kendre Miller went 71st overall to the New Orleans Saints. Tank Bigsby ended the 3rd round to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Tajay Spears also about mid-3rd round, I believe, to the Tennessee Titans. Roschon Johnson went on day 3, 4th round to the Chicago Bears, and Chase Brown went in the 5th round to the Cincinnati Bengals. So there's a lot to unpack with this tier. Let's start with Roschon Johnson because I think for me, he's the head of this tier. I wouldn't argue with anybody who took any one of these players ahead of the others. But for me, Roschon Johnson is the head of this tier because his backfield is one of the most open, and he has one of the most complementary skill sets to the current back there. Because they lost David Montgomery in free agency, they need an early down ball carrier. And yeah, they signed Deontay Foreman, who was good in spurts with the Carolina Panthers last year. I think Roschon Johnson and a running back to carry the early down workload in general was a priority for this Bears coaching staff. We have a running back who's 220 pounds, who's 6 foot, who can work on all 3 downs, was the best pass protecting back in this entire class, and worked as a good receiving back alongside Bijan Robinson at Texas last year, and also forced a missed tackle on like 46% of his touches. Even though it was a small sample size, we have a guy who can create on his own, who's going to be great with Justin Fields. You have an inside zone hammer up the middle to work in tandem with like the, read option type of quarterback that you have. I think it's a great fit. I think Roschon Johnson can command most of the goal line work for this team as well. And I'm already hearing Bears beat reporters say that he's going to be the starting running back by the end of training camp.
Yeah, no, I agree with that as well. Honestly, if I were to guess it right now, like going into training camp, it's probably going to be some mixture of Roschon and Foreman battling for the first and second down, between the tackles work. I'm assuming they're going to want to use Khalil Herbert more so in space, but I mean, he's got the full 3-down skill set. Like you said, he enters a situation when you start talking about a potential 3-back committee, hypothetically, all that screams to me is that it's an open backfield for the taking. If he shows he is the most talented running back in this backfield, Chicago, like you kind of mentioned, has already said that they're willing to let him earn the job. And with Roschon Johnson, apparently they were very, very interested on him. We hear that all the time, but 4th-round draft capital, obviously you would have preferred 2nd or 3rd, but 4th-round draft capital for a running back entering this scenario. I've made the comparison. You've made the comparison. It really, really speaks of Tyler Algier esque vibes from last year, where he entered that Atlanta Falcons backfield. They had, already Cordell Patterson in the bunch. They had, Caleb Huntley from the year before, and Tyler Algier just flat out outplayed those guys.
Yeah, not to mention the fact that I've compared him to Ramondre Stevenson from like a talent perspective. That situation, the reason Ramondre Stevenson won out his job is because he was one of the only backs in his backfield that could work on 3rd down. And Khalil Herbert, despite being a smaller back, is not the greatest pass catcher. Deontay Foreman, obviously pretty limited on 3rd down, mostly a between the tackles grinder. So Roschon Johnson, if he can get on the field on 3rd down, he's going to showcase his ability to run between the tackles and use his size as well. I think he has the best ability of the guys in this tier to take over his backfield by year 1, which is why he's at the head of this tier. And I feel comfortable taking this guy. Once Will Levis, Zach Charbonnet, Devon Achane, and the 2 tight ends, Mayer and Kincaid, are off the board, I would take Roschon Johnson as high as like 203, 204 in a rookie draft, as would I go for Kendre Miller, who's the next guy who I have ranked here, who went 71st overall to the New Orleans Saints. Obviously, better draft capital than Roschon Johnson, but a more murky situation as of right now, because Jamal Williams was signed to a 3-year deal. He has $8 million in dead money this year, $6 million in dead money a year from now. So he's probably going to be there most of Kendre Miller's rookie contract. And then Alvin Kamara, who most people assume is going to get suspended, has $24 million in dead cap this year and $17 million next year, along with $10 million in 2025. So Danny's probably chomping at the bit to talk about how they could get out of his contract potentially if he gets suspended, if it's a legal situation. But as of right now, from a pure contractual standpoint, this is a 3-way timeshare.
Yeah, no, I agree. I just want to address this real quickly because it is a fascinating scenario, because I don't want to look like, the Brian Windhorst meme, but the Saints took a running back in the draft. Now, why is that? We've heard all these, apparent rumors. We saw the video of Alvin Kamara's assault issue. We have not heard the legal situation of that deal. We don't know exactly right now what is going on with Alvin Kamara. The Saints already know financially that they're tied to Jamal Williams and Alvin Kamara. Why would they select a running back on day 2? What that tells me is that the Saints must have inside information that the Alvin Kamara assault issue is bad. He's probably going to get suspended. And at some point this offseason, they're probably going to use that from the litigation of this contract to terminate his contract. That is what I would understand, because there's probably a clause in his contract to get the Saints out of the dead money that his deal would represent if he had any, misdemeanors, if he had any, legal issues, which oddly enough are arising this offseason. So why would the Saints select a running back in the 3rd round on day 2 if they didn't have information right now that Alvin Kamara would not be available to them, and that they may just so happen to have an out on Alvin Kamara's huge contract that is really hamstrunging this team's salary cap?
Yeah, it's wild because I'm pretty sure, felonies and stuff like that are standard across all NFL contracts. You can terminate a contract if someone has a felony or even a assault misdemeanor if that's what he gets
Yep.
charged with. So I'd be curious to know, like, if anybody in the comments is like a lawyer or something and has done the
Let us
research on
know.
this. Let us know if you know that they have a terminatable, clause in his contract if he gets charged with assault, because that is probably, like Danny said, why they took Kendre Miller in the first place. And if Alvin Kamara is no longer in the picture, that clears it up a little bit more because Jamal Williams is 28 years old. Yeah, he's going to be a little bit of a pest. He's been a pest to DeAndre Swift and Aaron Jones in the past, but Kendre Miller can at least carve out at like a 50-50 type of role early on, maybe work him out of the backfield come 2024 or something like that. So Kendre is interesting. Another guy that I'm okay selecting in the early second round portion, mid-second round portion. Tank Bigsby is another guy that we need to talk about because I think this is interesting. We've kind of seen that Travis Etienne was not, fully entrusted. We know it's Doug Peterson as well, who likes running backs by committee. I don't think Travis Etienne is going to ever be a workhorse running back. I think they want him in a 10 to 12 touch, couple target per game type of role, like we've talked about with Gibbs so far, like we've talked about with Charbonnet so far. So I actually think Tank Bigsby might take over a relatively sizable workload on the ground, maybe compete for Etienne with Etienne for goal line touches as well. So I actually don't mind him at the tail end of the second round where he's often falling. I've seen him go in the third round of some of my rookie drafts as well. He got third round draft capital. Travis Etienne, while he's been pretty solid, has also been banged up. So you have the upside in case he got injured. And also, we don't know if they're going to pick up his fifth year option as well. So he might be gone, 2 years from now, and Tank Bigsby might be going into like his third season as the starting running back for this team. So a little bit more of a long-term play, a little bit more of a contingency, uncertain situation play. But I do actually really like Tank Bigsby where he's currently going.
Yeah, no, I agree as well. End of the second, early third area. Worst case scenario, you're getting a high leverage handcuff to one of the better projected offenses in the entire NFL with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Best case scenario, he cuts into some of Etienne's work, maybe get some of the between the tackles work, while Etienne has more of that receiving work, because that's what his profile would suggest, although he wasn't actually used that way once they cut James Robinson. I feel like they thought, you know what? We like that mixture we had between James Robinson and Travis Etienne. They just felt that James Robinson wasn't quite the same player that he was in his early career. So as a result, they add a bigger running back that can fill that between the tackles dirty work role with Tank Bigsby. I think this could be, like you kind of mentioned, one of the better duos in the entire NFL. Obviously, we know Etienne's going to get the most valuable touches, but if Bigsby's threatening, 8 to 10 touches per game as a rookie in one of the better offenses in the league. And then, of course, that high implied value if Etienne were to miss any time. End of the second round, early third round, you can't really ask for much better than that.
Yeah, I think the uncertainty things with Tank Bigsby can make you talk yourself out of him pretty quickly. But this is a guy who I had as my RB4 pre-draft from a talent standpoint. So I believed in the ability. He goes to an offense that should be one of the best in the NFL with day 2 draft capital. As much as the peripheral factors are a thing, I still think buying into the ability, buying into the fact that he's a part of a good offense will make you right more often than not. Whether it's Etienne getting injured, whether he just carves out a role. I think at minimum, this guy could be a flex play his rookie season, if not better. I think that's probably true of most of the guys in this tier with Kendre, with Roschon. The next guy that we're going to talk about with Chase Brown, who I actually have ranked very, very close to Tank Bigsby, because even though he went in the 5th round, Joe Mixon has been reportedly on the cut market, trade market, whatever you want to call it. And Chase Brown was my RB6 pre-draft. At some point in the offseason, he was my RB4 pre-draft. I think he does everything well. He can run between the tackles. He's got good vision, good patience, can catch the ball on third down, although he's not some great receiving back. This could be like an Elijah Mitchell situation, who was my comparison for Chase Brown, where maybe Joe Mixon gets banged up. He's got, 1,500 carries under his belt. This is a guy that is very, very washed at this point in time. And I think we saw that last year. He's borderline Ezekiel Elliott territory. And during the chaos of the regular season, it would not shock me if Chase Brown straight up outplays Joe Mixon and earns the job without injury or cut, let alone if Joe Mixon were to be cut or traded.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. I mean, in worst case scenario, he's this high leverage handcuff, like I kind of mentioned for Bigsby, on a very, very good team. Samaje Perine is out of the picture, and we have seen in the last 3 years, anytime Joe Mixon's been banged up, anytime Samaje Perine has gotten a heightened workload, this has been a legitimate running back too in fantasy. And I mean, we talked about it. We both loved Chase Brown in the pre-draft cycle. Yeah, would we have preferred he went, round 2 or round 3 to the Bengals? Absolutely. But if that was the case, the opportunity cost wouldn't be in your early to mid 3rd round of your rookie draft. The opportunity cost would be at minimum in the early second round, maybe even late first round area. So him going in round 5 gives you, that round and a half buffer of value. And yeah, we love Chase Brown. He's got that all around skill set. Got to make that quick shout out for the Canadian boy. But aside from that, I think you covered it all.
Yeah, and Tajay Spears, the last guy in this tier. I mean, we have medical concerns. It's reported that he doesn't even have an ACL or something like that. Tennessee is probably going to still have Derrick Henry. I mean, I think he probably would have been traded on draft night if they were going to trade him. Having Derrick Henry also helps Will Levis quite a bit. So I think they would probably like to keep Derrick Henry one more year, at least till the trade deadline or something like that. But I don't envision Tajay Spears, who's like, 200 pounds soaking wet, ever commanding a massive, massive workload, especially given the health concerns that he entered the draft with. So I think what you're getting out of Tajay Spears is another one of these guys that could carve himself out a 5 to 10 carry, 2 to 5 target type of workload. And he's probably going to be like a flex play type of option. Maybe he's like the new Khalil Herbert. Maybe he's like one of these type of guys where he works in as like a flex play most often, maybe RB2 upside if anything happens to Derrick Henry, but only in spurts. Michael Carter was my comparison for him. I think Michael Carter is probably the type of outlook we're looking for. Maybe like Michael Carter, there was a point in time where you could sell him for like a late first round pick or an early second round pick like we had before Breece Hall was drafted. That's kind of the career arc I'm envisioning for Tajay Spears.
I mean, I do see a little bit of a higher ceiling here. The reason why I'm more in on Tajay Spears, I have him a little bit higher than you. I believe he's my RB7. You have him, what, RB10, I think, right?
Yeah, RB10 is where he is for me.
The reason why I have it is because, I mean, it's still a very high implied value situation where if Derrick Henry were to go down, you're losing a lot of RB touches in that backfield. Although I don't think Tajay Spears would, absorb all of them, this is still a player that they felt comfortable taking on day 2 to absorb some of the touches. And not to mention, if we look at that receiving depth chart of that team, outside of Treylon Burks, outside of Chigakonkwo, maybe, would you be shocked if Tajay Spears at some point in his career was a top 3 target getter on the Titans, given his profile?
I would be, personally, because he didn't have quite the profile that would indicate that he would get super fed in the targets department. He looks good on film when you watch him get targets, but he never got fed targets at Tulane. He had like a 50th percentile target share. So for me, I see a change of pace back. That's what I thought he was coming out. That's what I think he is still. I think he's going to be, even if Derrick Henry's gone after this year, I think they're going to draft another guy to carry the early down workload. I just think there's going to be a lot of points in time where people think Tajay Spears' upside is higher than it is. I actually have him at RB9, not at RB10. So I think he's a fine, mid to late second round pick, but that's about where I'm at with him. And I'd probably, once I draft him, if he gets thrust into a workload at any point in time, I'd probably be looking to cash out for like an early to mid second rounder in 2024 if I can get one. Let's wrap this video up with the final tier of the video. Rapid fire. We have Deuce Vaughn here. He is my RB10 right now. I have him quite high relative to most people. Sean Tucker, who obviously went undrafted to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Dwayne McBride, 7th round pick to the Minnesota Vikings. Zach Evans, 6th round pick to the Los Angeles Rams. Israel Abanikanda, 5th round pick to the New York Jets. And then Chris Rodriguez, 6th or 7th round. I can't remember which round he went in exactly, to the Washington Commanders. So anybody here stick out to you? I think Tucker is getting propped up right now just because of pre-draft bias. He went undrafted. He's not even a lock to make the roster. So I can't go much crazier than this. I have him RB11, and I think that's very high on Sean Tucker, relatively speaking, to what we have.
Yeah, I have him a little bit lower simply because I like the situations that Evans and Abanikanda landed in personally. But yeah, you mentioned it. It's all of course, we had to talk about a Cowboy and a Buccaneer. Obviously, Deuce Vaughn joining my Cowboys. Shout out to his dad for actually being able to make that selection. And then Sean Tucker going to your Bucks with the undrafted capital, unfortunately. With Sean Tucker, like if this guy had gone on the draft, you could argue RB11 would be too low. But the fact that it's released now that he has a heart issue, didn't go draft in the NFL draft despite representing this elite athlete that could potentially play on all 3 downs, that's what concerns me here. I do think that there's a bigger medical red flag than people are letting on. With Deuce Vaughn, obviously, it's just going to be the ultimate ceiling for me. Can he really be, this 15 plus touch per game back? I don't necessarily see that, but I mean, could he be Tariq Cohen in a PPR format? I think that's where his upside pretty much caps off. The guys that I'm interested in, like I said, Zach Evans, kind of like a similar, doesn't really have that full nuance to play in the running back situation or running back position, but lands in a situation with the Los Angeles Rams where that was the issue with Cam Akers coming into the NFL, where he didn't quite know how to play running back. He was just this athlete that could break tackles. If Zach Evans is to fight with Cam Akers in the offseason, potentially earn a role in this backfield. I mean, we've seen that the Rams already had displeasure with Cam Akers. If Zach Evans just outperforms him in the preseason, I can see him potentially getting a role. And then with Israel Abanikanda, he just lands in a very, very good scheme for his skill set with a potential spot to become Breece Hall's backup running back, given the draft capital comparative to everyone else in that backfield. I mean, you got Michael Carter, doesn't really have the size. Zonovan Knight, undrafted free agent. I feel like there's an opportunity for him to carve out a role.
Yeah, I have issues with Abanikanda's talent. I think he's probably
Fair.
the fourth most talented back in his backfield, but he's still very young. He could develop behind Breece Hall and be a high-value handcuff in the long term. I think all of these guys, like their ceilings are role players and handcuffs. Like they're not going to become RB1, RB2s even. Deuce Vaughn, like you said, Tariq Cohen is the absolute nuts. Sean Tucker, best case scenario, he's the early down hammer on Rachaad White's main workload. Like I think Rachaad White will probably still be like RB2, RB3 value from like a redraft perspective. Sean Tucker maybe can work into the early down work. Dwayne McBride, let's say Dalvin Cook is traded tomorrow. Alexander Madison and him are probably splitting touches, even though I like Dwayne McBride and I think he can be a great early down hammer. That's probably his ceiling. Like best case scenario, he gives you like Damian Harris type of value in an absolute nuts range of outcomes. And then Zach Evans, my comp for him is Darrell Henderson. He goes to the Rams, which is kind of hilarious. And I think he can be like a change of pace back alongside Akers. And again, I think best case scenario, that's a split backfield.
Yeah, no, I agree there. Oddly enough, you mentioned with Dwayne McBride, like that would be like the ceiling range of outcome because obviously if things were to happen to Dalvin Cook, you would assume that Alex Madison, who they brought back, would get potentially the more workload.
Yeah, Chris Rodriguez, the only guy that we haven't talked about in this backfield. He's just kind of buried right now on the depth chart. I think he's kind of like Bijan Robinson's backup as of right now because I think they like the dynamic they have with Bijan Robinson as the hammer, Gibson is the change of pace receiving back, and then Chris Rodriguez would probably assume the hammer role, not Gibson, if anything happened to Bijan Robinson, which usually is how teams orchestrate their backfields. They have a change of pace guy who they want to be a change of pace guy, and then you have your third running back who's usually the same skill set as your first running back, like we saw in a lot of these backfields. We see that in Chicago as well. It looks like Roschon's backup is going to be Deontay Foreman. Khalil Herbert's going to stay in the role that he had before this. So that is the end of the running back tier list. Again, leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you guys are new around here. If you enjoyed and you want to check out more of our rankings, more of our content, check out flockfantasy.com. Use the promo code FSE, as you guys can see on the screen, for a 2-day free trial, 30% off all the packages, and 6 months for free if you sign up annually. That'll cover you through dynasty rookie drafts, dynasty season, best ball season, redraft preparation, and in-season content, and this time next year dynasty content if you sign up annually. So definitely a lot of value packed in there. We definitely appreciate all of you guys supporting us over there. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.